So PR has definitely evolved. It's basically your brand's reputation, how people feel about your brand. And that involves the public, stakeholders, current customers, future customers, investors. If you have sideload teams and your PR team comes up with great messaging and then someone interviews one of your employees and they say something wildly different, it really removes that credibility and it's eroding the public's trust.
I'm sure that if you don't do that fact checking and you put some message out in the media, now there's so many other fact checkers out there that'll definitely come back and say, hey, this isn't actually true. And that could ruin a company's reputation as well. What are important factors to consider when trying to push your brand in the media?
I think number one, finding an agency that aligns to your values. And when you're sourcing an agency, if they're not telling you what you shouldn't do as much as what you should, I would look elsewhere.
Hey everyone. In today's discussion, we have the wonderful Lindsay Ringette. She is a Senior Director of Marketing Communications at ISA Cybersecurity, where she translates complex cybersecurity information into compelling stories that resonate with business and public sector leaders. And she's an award-winning leader with more than a decade of experience. And Lindsay has led integrated marketing and communications campaigns for the public sector, non-for-profit, and government clients across Canada and abroad. So since joining ISA Cybersecurity in March of 2021, she has built the company's modern marketing engine, launched its flagship Cyber 360 messaging, and steered high-impact campaigns that helped the firm grow to become one of Canada's leading cybersecurity services and solutions providers. She's known for her ability to translate complex topics into accessible language. Lindsay frequently advises executives on crisis communication, stakeholder relations, and brand strategy. And she is passionate about using her knowledge and skills to support ISA's mission to create a world in which everyone is safe from cyber threats. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa.
Yeah, of course. I have had the pleasure of working with Lindsay for the past, well, I was going to say for the past 2 years, but I stepped in while Lindsay was on mat leave right away while we had about a month and a half to 2 months of overlap. I was like, I would love to work for with Lindsay at one point because she has so much knowledge. And I know this topic today is around PR and best practices that B2B organizations, small, mid-size, can take and implement so they can also raise some awareness and leverage PR to help increase some of their awareness and maybe even revenue. And so, Lindsay, I would love to understand more about how you even got into or interested in PR in the first place.
So first of all, also, thank you so much, Melissa. I absolutely loved working with you and big advocate of yours. Loving this podcast already. I've seen some of your other episodes, great content. So what started me in PR? If we go back in the days, I originally wanted to be a lawyer. Then I changed that to journalist. Then I changed that to PR. And I got my start in consumer PR and moved into B2B throughout my career and then more into marketing roles. And now in my current role, it's a lot of the amalgamation of both.
Got you. And this was an area of marketing or of an organization that I knew was so important. You know, you see companies in the media and you see the stories that are being told, both positive and negative. And so I'm curious, do you have a definition of what is PR and, what should businesses expect as a result of PR?
So PR has definitely evolved. I think the broad definition that I would say is it's basically your brand's reputation, how people feel about your brand. And that involves the public, stakeholders, it's current customers, future customers, investors, employees. It's the general reputation that your brand has. And activities around that can include everything from media relations, which I think we'll kind of focus on today a lot, but internal communications, thought leadership, crisis communications, product launches, all of these are part of your PR strategy.
Okay. And so it's there's a full sort of landscape of what PR, what's included under PR. And I remember when I first started, you had launched a PR campaign that, skyrocketed, and we'll get into it. But, it was one area where I can usually take things on and bullshit my way through it if I need to, if it's marketing related. This was one area that I was like shaking in my boots. I was like, I have no idea what to do if a journalist calls me, and you had been very clear about this is the messaging. If you if the messaging goes wrong, it can really impact a business's reputation. So I'm really excited to dive into this because it is an art, and it is that sort of like full landscape that you were talking about. But speaking of landscape, how do you feel the whole PR landscape for B2B has shifted over the past few years with the rise of digital and social channels?
So, I think kind of even what you were saying there, the nervousness around it, it's warranted because I've also seen PR can really skyrocket a business. It can also make it crumble. And your brand's reputation is built over years. It's multi-channel. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But effective PR, I think, ultimately boils down to really good cross-departmental collaboration. So I was just saying there's so many facets involved in it. If you have siloed teams and your PR team comes up with great messaging and then someone interviews one of your employees and they say something wildly different, or go on social media and say something wildly different, it really removes that credibility and it's eroding the public's trust. So one of the things I think is important when we're talking about PR is establishing that it is not advertising. You always have to remember, especially when talking to the media, advertising is paid. You totally control that message. People know it's an ad. PR is building trust and credibility through different channels. And when we talk about how it's changed, of course, it's now a digital first landscape. But when I started, and I'm kind of dating myself here, about a decade ago, it was much more of a mix. So I would spend my days getting on the subway, flipping through Metro and all these different newspapers that don't even exist anymore. I would do a Google search in the morning, and I can share a funny and disturbing story about searching the word Barbie back in the, early decade ago days.
I'm curious.
Yeah. Do you want to hear that story now, or should I?
What? Yeah, I don't know if we talked about this, or you may have alluded to it, but
So,
what is it?
okay, Mattel was one of our clients, and I would look in a magazine and find Barbie's Princess Dream House, and that was exactly the media coverage we wanted. But when you're doing the Google search, when you Googled Barbie, three results were mainly coming up. There was La Barbie, which was a Mexican drug lord. There was the Barbie, which was a surgery, which I won't go into the details of, but was causing a lot
I
of
think I know.
for women. So my results would be Barbie's Princess Dream House, tops 10 most wanted toy list this holiday season. La Barbie mass grave has been discovered. Very unwholesome things happen to those bodies.
Oh
Other things
no.
about the surgery. So it did just go to show, if you have a little kid Googling Barbie, they're going to get different results.
Results.
Yeah. So media coverage, I think that also speaks to that accessibility of anyone going in there and being able to see this information. It's not just print news. At any point, at any time, all PR is multi-channel and instant. And one of the biggest shifts I've seen, one that both scares me and is an opportunity, is a lot of newsrooms are shrinking. Journalists have bigger demands,
Oh,
tighter timelines. People don't want to wait for them to fact check. It's the information that gets out there first, whereas journalists do want to fact check as much as possible, but they also have to balance that now. So I think before you ever put together a media pitch, put yourself in the shoes of the journalist and say, how am I making their life easier? Do the fact checking for them. Be honest and transparent in what you're sending them.
mhm.
And think about what is important to your audience.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure we haven't really encountered it, but I'm sure that if you don't do that fact checking and you put some message out in the media, now there's so many other fact checkers out there that'll definitely come back and say, "Hey, this isn't actually true." And that could ruin a company's reputation as well.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, what does scare me is a lot of people can go out there and say something that is true is not. So I think you have to be very strategic in how you're controlling a message online. Not controlling, because you can't truly control it, but influencing it and participating in it. I think, for us in a B2B environment where for cybersecurity, facts are everything. You can't
Totally.
Misinformation has real and devastating consequences. So we're very careful about what we see out there, what information our experts share, which I do think is part of why journalists come to us now when there is a breach, because they know our experts are coming out there with well vetted information and leveraging their expertise. They're not trying to sell the business, they're trying to inform the public, which does in turn benefit us because even though we're B2B, our vision is to create a world in which everyone's safe from cyber crime. So the more you're delivering messages that educate employees of a business, the better that business is protected.
Yeah. I love that. Not trying to sell the business, you're trying to inform the public. And that seems like that's, going into the media, that is something that you should always consider is how can this inform the media versus just trying to sell your business or sorry, inform the public. And so really quickly, I know digital has sort of changed the game for PR a little bit. You had mentioned going on the metro, grabbing one of those papers. I used to do the exact same thing. And so what other channels have popped up that are widely used as a sort of part of PR?
So, I mean, definitely social media, influencers, everything. It's digital first now, for journalists as well. A lot of outlets, it's their online footprint rather than the print that people are going to. It also allows them to respond in a 24-hour news cycle, much more timely. In terms of channels, I think still in person also plays a big role. Like if you're going to do more from like a consumer perspective, if you're going to do like a PR stunt to get coverage, it is that in-person experience that is going to create all the content that gets shared digitally.
Yeah, that's true. And, we're on a podcast right now. Would you consider podcasting to be a form of PR, or is that another form of marketing?
I would say absolutely. I think the lines have blurred more. And I think
Yeah,
they should. It shouldn't be this siloed. Like you can't have your marketing department go out with a message that's wildly different from what the PR team is saying. Podcasts are a great platform to share expertise and thought leadership, which to me
yeah,
is PR. And to the same degree, I think people want quality content when they're spending the time listening to a podcast. They don't want to hear someone sit there and try to sell to them. They want to hear genuine insights and information.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, my listenership has definitely changed a lot from I love, of course, still reading media and different articles and different means, but I listen to podcasts so much now. And I don't know, maybe I'm one of a kind, but it just seems like it's blown up quite a bit. And I see a lot of different experts on podcasts sharing their knowledge, which then also can help increase their brand, the brand story, their brand perception, et cetera, et cetera. Nonetheless, I really am curious for your perspective on like when is the right time to leverage PR?
So, I mean, that's a good question. I would say always. But when you look at different areas of it, I think the definition might be a little bit different. Crisis communications can happen at any time. You have to have a strategy ready to go, coordination amongst multiple departments. Like I said, your team has to be ready to respond. Going back to what I was saying, like news outlets or news coverage, both influencer and traditional media are 24/7 now. Something happens, you have to be ready to go out there. But if you're looking more from a proactive business growth stance, PR should always flow from the corporate goals and strategy. So, for example, thought leadership is a big part of our PR strategy at ISA Cybersecurity. and October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So for us, there's a very clear timeline. That's when the general public, I think, is paying a little more attention. There's more media coverage. So we launched a national survey around a topic that is both compelling to our target markets, but the general public, which is kind of easier to do in our B2B environment. That might not always be the case for someone. And we share those insights as part of that general awareness in October. But you can also look at it. I think you should both have whatever your product or services roadmaps are, but you also just look at timely events. So for example, when I was at the London Eye in England, I worked there for a few years. We did a campaign around the Queen's Jubilee. So when I was there, Queen's Jubilee was happening. One thing I learned was that Gordon's Gin is a royal warrant holder, which basically royal warrants are like kind of like an endorsement from really, like they're a designated supplier. The definition, I might be getting it wrong a little bit, but they're associated. And so we did a partnership with Gordon's Gin, created a Queen's Diamond Jubilee Gordon's Gin tasting experience on the London Eye. And then I was on the marketing team, but I worked with PR team. Again, that synergy is very important.
Yeah.
And we turned the eye yellow with a green lime wedge in celebration of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee and this experience. So that got world media coverage because we were in a great position when you do change the London Eye and put out messaging why you've done that color change. It does typically get world coverage. And then our experience sold out within days. And then we allocated more tickets, sold out again. We couldn't keep up with the demand because people were really loving news around the Queen's Diamond Jubilee and a reason to celebrate that. And that experience tied to a timely thing in the news really resonated with people.
I love that. I love the tie-in between the marketing aspect and and seeing it evolve into the media and that importance of being creative. I think that the more creative you are in respect to a popular event or a main event can really catapult that coverage. So that's a really cool example.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It sounds like it. Oh, why can't we do that in cybersecurity?
Well, I mean, it's funny, like some ways it's harder to get consumer coverage because it looks more directly like selling. But in B2B, I think, especially for us in our, like, I know you shared this, you feel like you're part of a mission and there is more long-term tangible impact of the information you're putting out.
Definitely. And the important thing that you mentioned too at the very beginning was when you're involving PR, it needs to align with your goals and objectives. And you're not just doing it, for the sake of doing it. It needs to align with your, the core purpose and what you're actually trying to achieve. So that is incredibly important, as is everything that you do with marketing. But, it's a good reminder for trying to leverage PR as a channel.
I would even add to that, actually, that kind of goes back to the cross-department, right? Like if your marketing and PR teams are going out and saying something, but your internal staff and other stakeholders don't feel that that's true, that's going to come out.
Yeah, definitely. So it sounds like it can also expose an organization if you're not aligned.
Absolutely.
Organizationally.
Because now everyone has a voice. They can instantly go on their LinkedIn and be like, that's not true. And
100%. 100%. All right. I want to continue diving in a little bit deeper. As an organization, as you're considering to use PR as a channel that aligns with your goals, what are important factors to consider when trying to push your brand in the media?
So I think one of the most important factors, if you are trying to get media coverage, is choosing an agency with expertise in your area. I've worked both in the B2B and the consumer environments, and they are wildly different in terms of how we got media coverage. So for example, like in a consumer environment, you might do more of like a fun lifestyle stunt. Whereas in B2B, you've got to conduct insightful research. You have to give proprietary data. It's a longer sales cycle. So even how you measure it is going to be very different, right? Like you can't all of a sudden just look, okay, we sold more of this product. For us, it's a 6-month lead cycle. So
Yeah.
I think number one, finding an agency that aligns to your values. And when you're sourcing an agency, if they're not telling you what you shouldn't do as much as what you should, I would look elsewhere because
Ooh, good pro tip.
yeah, I think, I definitely had experience where clients would say, this is what we want our pitch to be. And we'll go back and say, that is an advertisement. That's never like, that's not what they're not going to cover that. The media's not going to cover that. So they're acting on behalf of them. So put yourself in the shoes of the journalist, but make sure your agency really understands that. And they've probably built a lot of relationships and they're not going to be willing to risk those relationships by giving information that is wasting a journalist's time when they're already under such a time crunch. And then I think one of the other important things to do is ask based on the type of product or service you're trying to launch, make sure media coverage is the right strategy. So if you're like a very niche, very specific target market, trying to get national media coverage isn't going to give you the same ROI as doing a community event within that demographic, doing very targeted ads to them. There's other ways to compel them as opposed to going after national media coverage.
Right. That's a really good point too. So PR is not always a fit, especially what I'm hearing is if your audience is super niche and your message might not resonate at the broader level, PR might not be the right channel for you. Is that what you're aligned to?
Yeah, I would say so because even, when I started at ISA, having this background, I was like, is this something we should invest time and effort? And I conducted interviews with the sales team, customers, different stakeholders. And one of the things that really stuck with me was everyone shared the same corporate values. They wanted to create awareness and education. But B, they said when they were trying to get in front of new clients, if they hadn't heard about us, they wouldn't take the call because it's a very skeptical audience in cybersecurity to begin with. But those that knew us would take the call and very, want to have these consultative discussions because they knew us as thought leaders. But there was a very distinct difference. So not only would PR coverage help us with our corporate goals and values, but it would help the sales team book those calls. And after, we can talk about metrics, but one of the things we saw, all of a sudden our website traffic doubled. So that was one good indicator. But again, B2B, it's not like they clicked and bought. We then had to look at those, did that impact the sales cycle and taking meetings? And our sales team was saying, all of a sudden people even like they'd be at their cottage and, their neighbor who worked for a business that could be a target market would say, by the way, I saw your CEO on CBC's national news sharing these insights that were really valuable that will make a difference in their employees' knowledge of cybersecurity.
It is pretty interesting how that word of mouth can circulate and improve credibility right away too. So there is power there, but you're right in terms of it might generate traffic volume increase, but maybe not you might not see that direct ROI. And as you mentioned before, PR should align with your goals and objectives, but also not necessarily be done on its own. Like there's other things similar to the London Eye example you shared. That was the PR part was a part of a broader marketing initiative or company initiative. I'm really excited to dive into some of these examples because I've been a part of or I've witnessed and seen the results of some of the PR initiatives and marketing campaigns that have PR part of it. I've seen the results that you've driven. And what amazes me is true to your bio is how you can translate complex topics or even topics that might not seem appealing and make them into like a newsworthy message.
Thank you.
So I hope we can go through some of an example or some of them.
Absolutely.
And so going into examples, can you share what makes something newsworthy versus not?
So to be newsworthy, it has to be new, timely, informative. Again, put yourself in the shoes of the end user. Someone telling you about their new service is not newsworthy. The market conditions that warranted that new service are newsworthy, right? What was the need? What's the value? I think that's probably where you need to invest most of your time, is understanding what is really compelling and insightful and going to shift the dial, and start from there.
Okay. Can I share an example and have you elaborate on it a little
Of
bit?
course.
So there were two kind of campaigns that involved PR. There was the education one a couple years ago, and then the finance one that you ran at ISA Cybersecurity, and they both involved research. And one of them, so like the education campaign focused on the study was on how you're probably better at this, but what I'm hoping you can share is like what was the study on, and then what was the story you put out into the media to make it compelling?
So it was on the questions were framed a lot around students' awareness of cybersecurity best practices and breaches at academic institutions. How aware were they of how their data was being used? And how much did that influence their decision to enroll or not enroll? Why we focused on that was, education, I think, is something we're big advocates for and very involved in that community. But universities have a lot of issues with funding around cybersecurity. It's often a cost center for places. So when you show that connection to the bottom line, a student not wanting to enroll because knowing that a student would not want to enroll because the institution experienced a cyber breach, it helps both us understand what we should be communicating with that audience, but it also helps them, our audience, the cyber teams, make the case for more funding, because that could have a big impact on enrollment. And what we did find very interesting was the level of awareness. I think even in the last few years, public sentiment and awareness around cyber breaches or data breaches and cybersecurity attacks has really shifted. And something that clear, that if that academic institution gained a lot of coverage for having bad practices, which resulted in a breach, students would actually take that as a consideration whether they enroll. And that's their whole future, right? Like their whole education. That's a really big statement.
The fact that they would look at that type of information, how secure is an organization or an educational institution, to make a decision where to go is pretty massive, and that could have some big material revenue specific impact on an institution. And so you did the study. Oh, sorry, go for
So
it.
I was going to say also, that was a few years ago, and we timed that because with the pandemic, classrooms went virtual. And it also meant a rapid shift in digital transformation for universities. I think the pressure on them was very high, and deciding where to invest in allowing an expanded digital footprint versus how secure it is a difficult decision.
Without a doubt. One thing that I know you're really focused on is making sure that messaging resonates, making sure that it is not a sale, that it truly does align with what the public would care about. Why does it matter for them? And so that's why I was like, it would be really, if you have the example or an example. Yeah.
So part of the messaging we put out was the results of the survey, different stats. But one of the big things we included was tips for students on how to be smarter in their cyber practices, and tips for the academic institutions on cost-effective cybersecurity measures.
Right.
Fast, cost-effective, like what are some of the quick wins they can have as they adapt to this rapid digital transformation?
So speaking of the message and the story behind the message, how do you identify and develop story angles that resonate not just with journalists, but your target audience?
So I think you have to go back to the values. What is the core of your company and your value differentiator. So what's your value proposition? So, I'll use an example coming off the top of my head. If you're a bakery that only sells goods made with organic ingredients, why did you do that? Was the environmental impact? Is it the health impact? Maybe it's both. So if you want to build your brand and business within a community, tie it with what the value is. If it's health, world a national day around health, or if it's the environment, you could do with Earth Day and do something like build the world's largest organic cookie, Guinness Book of World Record style, invite media to come out, taste it, say that the proceeds from the sales of that day will go towards environmental initiatives, invite local influencers, film that. It's a good opportunity to talk about the values that your brand has and how you're practicing what you preach, and then let your product speak for itself.
I love it. If you're an organic bakery listening, that is a great campaign idea. Amazing. Okay. And like, how often should businesses, review PR performance? What benchmarks indicate that they're on the right track as they are using PR as a channel?
So I think it depends on the type of campaign you're running. If you're doing a proactive campaign, metrics should be set out at the start. If you're doing something like a crisis communication strategy, those metrics would be different. But at any point along the journey, you should be reviewing the metrics to make sure whether or not you need to pivot the strategy a little bit. So for example, if you weren't seeing media picking up your pitch, go back and think, why is this not newsworthy? What are we missing? How do we make this more compelling? Is there additional research that could be conducted? Is there a different angle? And then you could also use other metrics like, are you not seeing the uptick in website traffic? Are your experts not relaying back to the brand? Very careful that they know not to sell and just being there trying to pitch the business. But how do you talk about expertise without the demonstration of where you use that expertise? So they can talk about the brand in a informative way. For example, right now I'm talking about our company because these are the examples that I find educational. You have to set out your metrics for the goals of your campaign. Is it just brand awareness? Is it increased calls for your sales team? Is it increased e-commerce? I would look at those metrics.
Right. Yeah, really good point. And like, I think what I'm walking away with as well is like PR is very strategic. The message you put out into the market, it needs to resonate. And you do a lot of that research when you're building a campaign as well. It needs to align with your target audience, et cetera, et cetera. But PR is almost that extra layer of sure it needs to resonate, but it can't sell. So you have that extra messaging, massaging sort of brain work that you need to do to make sure that it is worthwhile to your audience. Otherwise, it could be a waste of effort. And so you also mentioned something in the previous question, and example you gave was like you could reach out to media outlets and invite them to come to the store opening or whatnot. And is there something that small marketing teams that might not have a big budget for PR or to hire an agency can they do anything on their own to try and get media attention?
So if they're specifically trying to get media attention, absolutely, I would, reach out to your local newsrooms. They'll have channels so you can do that. Ideally, you do find even an agency that's willing to take a smaller client. Some will specialize in small because they have those relationships, the lists, they're ready to go. They can help you craft that narrative. But even looking at the influencer market can also be effective, whether you run, like if you're in tourism, you could use an influencer to help raise awareness for something unique about your city.
Okay, yeah, those are really great examples. Again, because I know some people in some organizations that might be listening don't have a big budget or don't have a big marketing team, but are interested in getting their name out there a little bit more. And this has been super interesting. And thank you so much. Was there anything else you wanted to leave on the table as it relates to PR, using it as a channel, or any other hot tips you have?
So I think what I'd like to leave on the table is trust and authenticity. It's very easy, I think, sometimes for people to lose sight of that in the drive to increase revenue and build their brand. But people are pretty clever and they will see through that. Always put yourself in the audience's shoes, whether that is the journalist or your customer. Remember to take your work hat off, go to the other side and be like, okay, is this actually newsworthy and valuable? Is this compelling, fun, exciting? If not, go back to the drawing board.
Awesome. Yeah, that's like a perfect summary of a lot of the insights that you shared, along with some really cool examples. So thank you so much again. I always love tapping into your insights and collaborating with you because it's just a new angle to stretch when it comes to marketing. So thank you again, and I'm sure I'm going to ask you to come back in the future.
My pleasure. It's always wonderful talking to you, and I can talk about this stuff for ages. So happy to be back.
All right.